Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. It's time for the 50th episode of the 2021-2022 season. The second race of the year took place in Hulst and I'm going to discuss this with the usual suspects of Twan and Issam.
Hey everybody.
Hello.
Unlike last year, we weren't racing in the Perkpolder near the sea. We were back on the normal parcours of Hulst in the city centre. No Mathieu van der Poel, the known reason is there. He has an issue with his back and he is still not returned towards racing. Issam will tell us, however, how the riders who were there did do it in the men's race.
Yes, indeed, the 13th round of the World Cup in Hulst, and we saw a very strong Van der Haar at the start with Tom van der Bos and Eli Iserbyt, the World Cup leader. Also, Van Aert didn't miss his start. Van Aert struggled a little bit in the first lap, and at the first lap we saw a traffic jam with Jose van der Meer and Henrik Hausler. And then in the first lap as well, Wout van Aert dropped his chain. Lost valuable time with that, almost 40 seconds, and then had to fight back in on the circuit and parcours, which is very tough to pass. A lot of single track, very hard. So Van der Haar tries to put them under pressure in the first laps, and then because of the situation of Van Aert not being there and his streak that will end after this race, because he will only manage to get fourth place. Still a good race from him, but yeah, it was just nothing he could do. Were Tom Pidcock and Eli Iserbyt that took initiative in the race and tried to put the others under pressure. Only Lars van der Haar was able to follow a little bit closer. Pidcock then tries to put Eli Iserbyt under pressure and managed to do so. Iserbyt, the fighter that he is, kept the gap on 5, 8, 10 seconds, but was eventually just not able to battle for victory with Pidcock, or at least was not able to get closer to him. And so in the end, Tom Pidcock wins the first race of the season for Ineos Grenadiers. Second place for Eli Iserbyt, that also wins the World Cup of 2021-2022. And the third place for the European champion Lars van der Haar.
Tom Pidcock taking his second win of the season here in Hulst. Second win in the Netherlands as well, and it's the first time since the 2010-2011 cyclocross season that in the World Cup there is a non-Dutch or Belgian rider that wins more than one World Cup. Back then it was Zdeněk Stybar, now it's Tom Pidcock. About the race of Pidcock, in my opinion, Pidcock rode a very smart race. In the beginning of the race he was waiting. Once it got clear that Van Aert was significantly closing in, he moved to the front so he didn't waste energy too early. Moved to the front at the right moment, put on the maximum pressure, and you could immediately see that his technique was paying off. He was dropping riders, only Iserbyt and Van der Haar were able to follow, and then eventually just by keeping the pace high, corner through corner, hill through hill, downhill through downhill, Pidcock just managed to drain the rest. And then when Iserbyt eventually cracked, Pidcock, in my opinion, just consolidated his lead. It didn't look to me that he was really trying even to extend his gap. He was just yo-yoing with Iserbyt. Iserbyt got to 6 seconds, he accelerated a bit, the gap was 10 again. Iserbyt kept on fighting, but Pidcock, in my opinion, had it in control, and I think that was a very mature ride by Tom Pidcock.
Even when it couldn't get it out of a small chainring, he managed to keep the gap pretty stable. I had to take it a little bit easier in the downhills, as he said in a post-race interview. Was a little bit scared to drop the chain like Wout van Aert did at the start. But as you said, indeed, it's a very mature ride by the young Brit, and another beautiful World Cup victory for him.
Yeah, I think Pidcock, like you guys said, mature ride from him. I would say that there was one moment in the last lap where Iserbyt got a little bit close, and then you could just see that Pidcock, reacted on that and made sure that Iserbyt was not going to gain any grounds after that. And I think the strongest has won. Very smart from him in a way, and you could see after, when he crossed the line, the Pidcock could have done another lap. And I think, when you have that kind of condition and shape, that's obviously that's the most satisfying win to most satisfying way to win. So I guess just a mature rider, very strong. But I would also say that Iserbyt also a very strong ride from him. He was the only one that was making sure that we at least had some sort of a battle. And once again proving that he is able to also in the month of January to score very well in a race.
Yeah, and good to see Pidcock on top. And yesterday we already said it, that we thought the form of Pidcock was improving. This is just more evidence of it, and I don't really think there's a lot more that we can say about it. But the riders behind him, let's talk about the obvious guy who we expected to win here today, Wout van Aert, having that mechanical. taking eventually a great comeback and becoming 4th. Issam, can you explain why on this parcours it was so hard for Wout van Aert to overtake riders and come back towards the front compared to other races where we have seen likes of Van der Poel and Sven Nys easily being to come back from last position in the beginning of the race?
I think the main thing is that there is not really a place where you have a very long effort, or at least where you can put a lot of effort for a longer time. It's a lot of short effort moments where you have shorter hills, single track, a lot of in a lot of places, a lot of turning. So eventually you cannot really use the power that you have, and even if you could, you always have a rider in front of you, so you will always be hampered in a way. And I think that was also what happened with Van Aert. You could see it even in his first lap. He had a little bit of frustration when he tried to pass a couple of guys on the inside, but couldn't really do anything. So then you have to make a decision. Do you want to, at what cost do you want to try to get to the front? And I think that he realized quite quickly that it wouldn't be for victory. And then he just, the pace that he was doing was almost the same pace as the guys in front. Obviously, it was a bit slower because he had to overtake a couple of guys. But in the end, he consolidated that quite well. And, he just rolls into 4th place, which was almost effortless in a way. So you can conclude that his form and shape is 100% there. Just a bit of bad luck.
I mean, everyone can have bad luck, and I agree with what you said, that is why it was difficult. If we look back towards the race, at some point we saw a replay. We had this tight corner into this off-camber, which looked a bit like the off-camber in Hamme. Van Aert there tried to dive bomb a couple of riders, and it just didn't work. These riders were frustrated. He was frustrated that it didn't work and that he was being held up. So, yeah, it was just not wide enough. And this parcours, I mean, the scenery is absolutely beautiful, but is it the best parcours for a World Cup? That's debatable. I mean, everyone can have their opinion on it. Personally, it's not my favorite World Cup race. It's also not the worst World Cup race, but it's just an average course, and hopefully in the coming years there will be more countries that can organize a race similar to this, or perhaps even a bit better, that can take the place of Hulst in the World Cup. But in reality, that won't happen probably, because we are going to go have the World Championships in Hulst at the parcours of last year, that is, not in the city parcours, in a couple of years. I think in 4 or 5 years' time we are going there. Let's then look at the riders who did end on the podium in front of Van Aert, who of course had that mechanical Iserbyt and Van der Haar. First of all, let's talk about Eli Iserbyt. Issam, what did you think about the race of Iserbyt?
A strong race in a way. Again, just in Baal, he had to chase, and it was for him quite easy to just say, "Oh, okay, Pidcock is gone. He has 5-10 seconds. I'm gonna leave it at that, and I'm just gonna secure that second place." But he tried on, and he tried on pushing and tried to keep that gap close. And I think for him, a very strong race once again. And it's going to be interesting, that Belgium Championship, which is coming up. I think that he is looking towards that. And if Van Aert has a similar issue at that championship, there's always a chance. And he has some teammates there. I don't know exactly how the parcours really is, but, if tactics can be played, and if Van Aert doesn't have the luck as the luck that he had today, everything is possible. So I think for him it's quite positive, this race, and I'm looking forward to the next couple of races from his side.
It's certainly another good race, but however, the conditions do confirm to me that Iserbyt usually struggles in this period of the year because of the temperatures. Today it was extremely soft, almost 14 degrees. And yes, there's a storm now, but that only came after the race. It was soft conditions, soft parcours that suits Iserbyt better than the conditions that we saw earlier in December. Only thing I'm not a big fan of is that every week there's a new story around Iserbyt. Earlier this year we had the story of saying, "Oh no, I was peaking for the early season." Was in the early season he said, "Oh, I'm peaking for when Van der Poel, Pidcock and Van der Poel come into the field." That was contradicting of each other. Then in December he said, "Oh, I peaked for earlier, so I was out of form." Now they are turning that story around again, saying in December he actually was building towards a peak in January and was conserving energy to do that. So apparently they changed the entire narrative again. That's the only thing I'm not a big fan of. It just is a bit of confusion. I think that Iserbyt just struggles in colder conditions and on tougher parcourses, and that this is something that suits him better, and that the form is definitely there. The only question is it good enough to compete for the podiums at the championships? We'll need to wait and see on that one. But he did secure the overall World Cup victory, and that is something that he hasn't done before in his career, so he should be very happy with that one for sure. Someone else who should be happy is Lars van der Haar, the European champion, ending third. Twan, what did you think of his race?
I was very happy to see where he was. It's basically his first very good performance, I think, since he took his victory in Tabor. And today he found a parkour that is very good for him. And he was able to take the benefit as well from, of course, the Wout van Aert mechanical early on. And just rode a very solid race, a little bit behind Iserbyt and Pidcock, of course. But just very steady, and can be very happy with that.
You should indeed be happy, but I do think that there is something that has to be in the back of the head of Lars van der Haar. Every lap he lost 5 seconds by needing to run the barriers, and that's also why he got dropped from the wheel of Pidcock and Iserbyt earlier in the race. It's really something that cost him a lot of time today, in my opinion, because I think without that he could have been a lot closer towards competing for the win. Let's run down our entire top 10 then. Of course, had that win of Pidcock in front of Iserbyt, Van der Haar and Van Aert, who we just discussed. Then we find a couple of riders who did not find the parcours to their liking here today. Aerts ahead of Van Torhini and the Hermans. 8th place went to Laurens Week ahead of Vincent Baestaans, and 10th place went to Toon van der Bos. Not really any surprising names in the top 10 today. I mean, Baestaans doing a good job today, still not having a contract, but that story is known. We've discussed it for quite a while. Outside of the top 10, I do see a name that I want to discuss. Clemont Van Torhini, French champion, riding his first race of the season, ending 20th. I was pretty impressed by that, because he was called up as one of the last or even the last rider for the start.
Yeah, I think he finds a parkour year that really suits him, but it's really hard to make your way through traffic on a course like this, and he did an amazing job of it, and that will surely give him confidence, and hopefully a few UCI points as well as he tries to move up the order.
I'm pretty excited to see what Van Torhini can do in the rest of the season. I'm pretty charmed by his technical abilities, and I remember the days when he was still riding for Cofidis and he was allowed to do a bit more cyclocross. He was actually a front runner back then, or at least in the smaller races. I think that if you consider the under 23 riders in front of him and the amount of Belgians that will be reduced, I don't put it past Van Torhini to get a top 10 at the World Championships. What do you think, Issam? Is that realistic for him?
Oh, I don't know. I can understand in a way where you're coming from with that, and I would want to see a little bit more from Van Torhini in a way. So I'm looking forward to the next couple of races he's gonna do. But yeah, with a guy with that talent coming in your first race, getting in the top 20, I think nobody can dispute that is something that not a lot of people can do in a way. And he started from the back completely. So I think that he that he has a good shot of getting in the top 10, but that the next coming races are going to be very important for him to get the rhythm, to make sure that he gets a little bit close to the front, and then we can see what is possible. But yeah, definitely encouraging.
Let's talk about the women's race then. Twan will tell us exactly what went down there.
It was a great start by Marianne Vos, who went first into the field. Unfortunately, she would make a mistake. Van Empel caught up behind her, but it was Pieterse that managed to get the clear line. And with that, she merely took a little bit of an advantage. And for the majority of the race, she would keep it with a few laps to go. In the 4th lap, it would be Lucinda Brandt that would really start chasing hard, with Blanca Vos trying to follow her, quickly closing down on Pieterse, and in the end catching her as well before we entered the final lap. And in the final lap, she would dispatch over Pieterse, would still manage a 2nd place behind the world champion, and Anamari Vorst in 3rd.
Let's talk about that race then. Lucinda Brandt taking the 15th win of the season. It's incredible. She just keeps on winning today. And In my opinion, I didn't fully expect it today. I thought that this was going to be something for Marianne Vos, who has been very good this season. Parcours was somewhat similar to Rukve. Vos, however, ended 6th. What was up with Vos today?
Yeah, what wasn't up with Vos today, especially in the first lap, I think there were 3, 4, 5 mistakes that were made. She started very well, and then it kind of just faded. Mistakes that we are not really used from Vos. Then it was like she was almost out of rhythm, and then I think in the last couple of laps you could see that she was getting back into a rhythm and finishing pretty strong, I would say. But yeah, it was not really her day, and it's not encouraging in a way. But I think that is just more a matter of just not having your day than something else. I would expect that Vos is going to be way better in the next couple of races, and for her there's only one goal, that's the World Championship. So I don't think there is any panic in the camp of Vos.
Do we think that it's maybe the lack of race rhythm that is breaking up Marianne Vos? Because she's only doing the World Cups. She did Rukve, then she did Dendermonde, and then she did Hulst. Other riders we've seen riding Zolder and Loenhout and really building up that race rhythm. Vos we haven't. Can that be a reason that, especially on a parcours like this, where it's really about getting in a flow, which is simply easier if you've done some racing, is that maybe what's breaking Vos up today?
Oh yeah, for sure that can be a thing. I mean, the last race was in Dendermonde. This is definitely a race where you need to have these basic things. You have to ask a lot from that. Dismounting, getting on and off your bike, some running sections, a lot of off camber, little turns, and those are things that you don't do that often in a race trim, in a race pace in a way. So I think that was just kind of the issue. And eventually when she got into a rhythm, she stayed very, very good in position and eventually finished 6th. So I think that if she had done a race or two before that, then obviously she would have been a little bit better. But I think for Vos, the main thing is that she doesn't want to be good in Hulst. She wants to be good in Fayetteville, and I think with all her experience that she has, she's going to be in top condition when she goes to the United States.
Eventually today it wasn't enough for Vos to take that victory. It went to Brandt again, but for a long while it was Pieterse who led the race, and she was looking very good. But did she get too excited and blow herself up, or did Brandt just turn up the pace throughout the rest of the race?
I think Brandt at the start had a little bit of trouble with moving up, and which I think by her was also completely fine, because it looked like she was taking it a little bit easier, because when she really turned on the screws, trying to catch back up with Pieterse, it really went with about 10 seconds per lap, and even with those there were quite a few mistakes. So I think Brandt was just the best today, and took it a little bit easy in hopes of conserving energy throughout the Christmas period to make sure every performance is good enough to take a win.
Yeah, it was probably a bit of both. I mean, Brandt accelerated towards the end of the race. Pieterse slowed down towards the end of the race. I think that this parcours was something very good for Pieterse, and that's also why I wasn't really surprised to see Pieterse, Vas, Van Empel and Van Anrooij at the front of the race in the beginning. These riders really have a great and fabulous technique, and this is just corner after corner, small uphill, small downhill, very technical. I think Pieterse would have fully deserved the win today. It didn't work out for her today, but being on 5 seconds of Brandt is definitely not a shame in my opinion. I don't think that there was really anything that could have made the difference, but there's one thing in my opinion that perhaps could have helped her out a bit. It was when Brandt was closing the gap. It was long overdue that Pieterse would be caught, but Pieterse kept on fighting for the small gap that she had. Should somebody of the entourage of Alpecin have shouted towards Pieterse, Brandt is coming, take it easy for half a lap, recover and then try and hang on to Brandt, because we could see it coming from far away that Brandt was going to close that gap.
The problem is they have two very different profiles, right? So Pieterse is the one that's strong on the technical parts, and Brandt is the strong one on the on the power section. So ideally you want to be leading in the technical part. So it's really hard, especially on a course like Hulst, where there isn't too many opportunities to pass easily. Like hanging on to a lead, I think it's an okay tactic here.
Yeah, I think it maybe could have made a difference if somebody would have told her that, but on the other hand, like if I look at her lap times, they were already going up a bit before Brandt really accelerated. But if that would have happened, then again, I don't think it would have really made a significant difference. I think Brandt was just simply the strongest today, as she's been throughout the past couple of weeks. But we need to just be sure. I mean, the World Cup victory, or just a big victory for Pieterse, is long overdue, and it will come at some point. Will it be this season or will it be next season? That's the only question, but without a doubt, Pieterse has made a huge step this year, and we are going to be treated with more great battles between Brandt, Pieterse, and perhaps, or not perhaps, for sure, Van Empel, Van Anrooij, Vos, just all these young women who are coming through today. And, I mean, their technique is just so good. And Brandt, I mean, sure, Brandt fine-tuned her technique, and it's not as bad as it was, but compared with Pieterse, I mean, Pieterse is just something else. That's just... The woman and the machine have turned into one, and on today's course you could see it. The confidence she had in the downhills, the way she went through corners, the way she hops the barriers, is just something that the more technical the parcours gets, the more difficult it's going to beat Pieterse, especially when she gains a bit more strength as well. And today, a second place, I think she can be happy with that. Brandt obviously now taking the win here and consolidating her position in the overall. I think she only needs a 5th place in Hoge Heide if she skips Flamanville, and then Betsema needs to win both races. So that overall is locked in for Brandt as well. About Betsema, I don't think that Betsema actually had a bad race today. Betsema had a bad start. She missed her pedal, but then was able to match the lap times of the leaders, with exception of one lap where she had a bit of bad luck. Do you think that based on these lap times, it's fair to expect that Betsema, without that bad start, could have been fighting for the win today?
Yeah, I think that Betsema, well, I mean, for the win is maybe a bit far, but definitely for the podium. And obviously she lost a lot of ground at the start. I think that at a certain point in the first lap she was 30th or 35th, I don't know, but that was what her coach told the Belgium media during the race. So I think that it's fair to say that she would have been on the podium for sure. And yeah, it's a bit of a shame that she couldn't be there when Brandt was there at the front, but that's how the racing is in Hulst, and that's a bit what you can expect from such a parcours. If you know, especially in the first lap, we have seen it at the men's race and also in the women's race. It's very tough at certain sections, and it feels like you're in some sort of a morning traffic jam. You cannot go anywhere. So yeah, it's very tough, and in the end, I think that she cannot be very disappointed with her race, because you know those things at the start can happen, and then it's very hard to get back.
Now that place on the podium goes to Anamari Vorst. She rode a pretty anonymous race, in my opinion. Never really in that podium position until the final lap. What can we say about her race?
Very smart. I mean, moving up when was necessary, and kind of knowing what was and what wasn't possible. I think that she knew that following Brandt was just a little bit too much, but then when she saw Vos, she knew that she could battle for third place, and then overtook her at the right moment, and then controlled that third place. And I think overall a strong result, but maybe for her, I don't know, maybe she's looking for a little bit more than a third place here, considering especially that she takes some rest here and there, and she skips some races, so she's a little bit fresher, like Pieterse. But obviously there's an age difference between Pieterse and Vos, so yeah, I think she can be looking positive to this, obviously also with her back injury, but in another way it's also not really it is a bit double in such a result.
Yeah, you can imagine she would want slightly more out of this, but I think it's just generally trending in the right way, being about and around and about where she's supposed to be if she wants to challenge for victories in the long term again. So I think that is the most important thing for her at the moment with championships coming up.
Let's run down our entire top 10 then. All Dutch podium once again. Brandt ahead of Pieterse and Vorst. Just outside that, Capablanca Vos ending 4th ahead of Fem van Empel, Marianne Vos, Denise Betsema, Sherin van Anrooij and Inge van der Heijden. And the 10th place goes to Alicia Frank. Let's first talk here about Capablanca Vos. I think she did a strong ride today, but would you guys agree that she maybe set out a bit too fast again and was doing too much work in the middle part of the race, which eventually cost her a podium spot?
I mean, it's Vash, so that's a bit her style of riding. I would, I don't think you can change that in a way. That's just the temperament that she has. She wants to take initiative a lot. She wants to push. If she has some energy, she wants to showcase that and put others under pressure, even if that costs in the end a little bit of her result. I think that if she would have taken it a little bit more conservative, she would have definitely ended up on the podium, because she had the energy to do so. But I think that's just a part of the learning process, and these races make you stronger, and I think she can look back on a very strong race. But yeah, of course you can look at it from another way and say, yeah, if she thrown away a podium, and now she's 4th, she has nothing in a way, and yeah. But it is what it is. I think overall a strong ride from her, and it's already better than it was in Namur when she came back from Tabor. So looking very good at the moment.
I would agree that there's definitely some maturing to do for her in the way she paces her races, and tends to pace whole groups of people, which in cyclocross it isn't usually too bad to be at the front of the group. But when it is quite easy to keep the wheel, like for example we saw in Tabor, it of course is far from ideal. And I would have to say, I think at the Road World Championship she did a very good job of it. The only time I basically saw her was the last few meters when she actually got her top 10 there.
I think overall we can also conclude that Vasher form is improving. We also concluded this already after Baal. Things are improving, and perhaps she can actually compete for a podium at the World Championships. Will be tough, very competitive field in the women's category, especially for the places maybe behind Brandt, or although Brandt will be the big favorite, that's more what I mean. Is it possible to beat Brandt? For sure. Will it be difficult? For sure. But are there a lot of riders that can actually do it? Yeah, for sure. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Although we do have to note that Pieterse and also Van Empel and Van Anrooij will most likely be riding in the under-23 category if we are to believe the Dutch national coach. But he also acknowledged that he hadn't talked about it with those riders. 2 of those riders, Van Empel and Van Anrooij, both starting well today but falling back. My hot take, or not hot take, just my take on it is set out a bit too fast, fell back a bit, and on this parcours like this, Twan said it earlier to me, he just felt like riders fall into the place where they are at some point, and then you don't really see about it because it's hard to close a gap, and that's also my conclusion about the race of Van Empel and Van Anrooij. However, I do still need to mention here a very strong ride by Alicia Frank, who ends 10th here. What do we make out of her race today?
Yeah, at a certain point she got the attention from the Belgium coverage that she was riding in the top 10 halfway through the race, and then never gave that position up. Clozel came pretty close from behind, but eventually it was just not enough, and just a strong ride from Frank, being the first Belgium women in the race as well. And I think for her it's been a while since she has been in the top 10, so in a World Cup. So I think that quite encouraging and definitely interesting if you're looking already a little bit more ahead into the championships.
It's obviously going to be now the story Frank against Kant for the Belgian championships, but yes, Kant wasn't good today, but we already said it yesterday, Kant is doing too many races. Fast parcourses are a struggle this year, and the second day races are a struggle for her as well, and we saw that again today. But I think Kant will still be the main favorite for the Belgian championships, but riders like Frank and Ribeiro, perhaps even for Donschot, who was close to Kant today, and you never know with Lotte Kopecky, perhaps they can do something on those national championships. Today again, disappointing results from Rochette and Honsinger. But for Rochette, the story is known. She's sick. For Honsinger, the story is also known. She doesn't like fast courses, and today the start is crucial. So overall, not a lot to say there. Final mention here maybe for Luxembourg. Marcia Rus might actually lose her insane long winning streak at the national championships because Marie Schreiber was very close this year. So Bakset junior woman ending 27th today. And that brings me to one rider that I would like to mention as last one. First year under 22, Teresa Kurniška from Slovakia in the 31st today. I will be keeping an eye out on her. I've seen quite some improvements on her side. Maybe nothing crazy yet so far. I don't have high expectations, but I will definitely be looking forward to what comes from this young rider. I think that then concludes our podcast for Hulst. We are getting one day off before we go back to racing in Gullegem. Twan and Issam, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for hosting. Thank you.
And we'll be back with a new podcast after Gullegem. It's going to be a short one, but we will still be covering Tom Pidcock racing there. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.